Here we go, and we thought contracts were a little bit confusing. This first lecture may be somewhat confusing, so hang on to your hat. I've got some examples to show you, and hopefully that will help. And I hope everybody's having a great, or had a great spring break. So we're looking at negotiable instruments, and that's chapter 13. Terminology I'm going to go over, and then we'll kind of delve into the instruments in this first lecture, or overview. We're going to be looking at some really interesting terminology, and it's going to be confusing. So let's kind of turn this into layman's terms. It talks about a draft, and a draft is an instrument that, let's see, the best way to put this is an instrument that somebody, well, I'll give you the technical terms and then we'll sort it out from there. It's an instrument drawn on a drawee that orders the drawee to pay a certain amount of funds, usually to a third party named the payer, on demand or at a definite future time. Fancy way of saying it's a check or a order to pay of some type, and that involves a drawer, a drawee, and a payee. Now, the drawer is the person who writes the check. The drawee is the bank that the check is written on. And the payee is the person who's going to cash the check at the bank. That can get really confusing, so just keep that in mind. You have the drawer who writes the check, the drawee who is the holder of the money of the drawer, and the payee who is going to receive the money. Now, if you look at the next word that comes up is a promissory note, and a promissory note is a promise to pay instrument. The technical term is a written promise made by one person, which is the maker, right here, to pay a fixed amount of money on demand or at a specific date to the payee. So we have a promissory note, we have a maker, which is similar to the drawer, and we have a payee. It does not appear to be a drawee in the middle. A promissory note typically does have interest attached to it. Then we have something called endorsement, and endorsement is simply your signature on a negotiable instrument. It just states you are who you are and assigns the ability to use that instrument. You have a bearer or a holder, and those are similar. If you look at the definition, any person for a holder, any person in possession of an instrument drawn, issued, or endorsed to him, her, or his order to bearer or in blank. Now, the bearer definition per the book is a person in possession of an instrument payable to bearer or endorsed in blank. So they're very similar. These two, basically what that's saying is you hold the instrument or you have it, you bear the instrument. There's one other we're going to look at, and it's called holder in due course, and this is a person who is usually a third party, and it's somebody who's acquired the negotiable instrument for value or in good faith or in good faith, and it's usually similar to somebody who's transferred that instrument to a third party. When that happens, and if the right conditions are met, there are specific and special rights that the holder in due course has. Then we have the assignor and the assignee up here. These are from previous chapters. I just wanted to do a really quick overview. I could assign my instrument to somebody else, and they would be the assignee. And we look at that down here with the transfer of instruments. And then you have makers and acceptors. And it kind of sounds like nursery rhymes, doesn't it? So a maker is one who promises to pay a fixed amount of funds to the holder of a promissory note or a CD, a certificate of deposit. An acceptor is a drawee. Now remember, they're the people that are going to pay out, that are holding the money, that accepts and promises to pay an instrument when it's presented later for payment, which would be what a CD would be. A CD, you would buy it, or you would deposit money for it, and in 3 months you would go back to the bank and receive that money back plus interest. So you have makers and you have acceptors. Now let's go down and look at the type of negotiable instruments we have. We have 4 types the book talks about. You have a draft, which is the check, and they can be time or sight, which means they can be due at a specific time or they can be due on a demand, and this is a order to pay. Checks are the most common type of a draft. You have promissory notes, and those are time or demand, and you have certificates of deposits, which are promised to pay. There are 2 classifications. You have the demand or orders to pay, which the drafts and the checks fall into, and then you have time, which is promises to pay, and those are usually paid in the future or upon presentation. So keeping those in mind, let's kind of look. I can give you examples of these. It might help. Here's a time draft, which says, and you can see here's the payee, here's the drawee here, which is the bank, and here's the person who wrote it out. And this is, see this pay to order? This is very important because that's an order to pay. That's one classification. Here's a promise to pay, and this is a promissory note. And again, you've got the co-makers, see this? You have the payee, and you have an interest rate right here. So there's examples here, and we have one more down here. This is a CD written out. I think a lot of these are done electronically anymore, but you can see it's negotiable, certificate of deposit, which means they can assign these or give these to somebody else. Again, you have the maker here from the bank, and notice here it says the bearer. This is a bearer instrument, which means whoever holds this document will be able to negotiate it at the bank. So those are 3 examples of the types of instruments. Now, what are the requirements to say that these are negotiable? So, first of all, they have to be in writing. They have to be signed by the maker, or the bank, okay, or the drawer, the check writer. It has to be an unconditional promise to pay or order to pay. The words I, we promise to pay should be in there. There should be no conditions. I promise to pay you if you mop my floor. That condition shouldn't be on a negotiable instrument. Using an IOU, if you just write out I owe you $3,000, that does not work. So that is not a negotiable instrument. It has to state a fixed amount, and it has to be payable upon demand or at a definite time. And finally, it's payable to order or the bearer. And there's a big difference in how those are received when they are transferred or turned in. That's kind of the basics. If you go on, then you'll find you can transfer these instruments, and you can transfer by assignment, where the rights of the assigner get passed on to the assignee, and the defenses for the assignment are fairly close to what the assigner's was. You can transfer by negotiation, where you still retain the rights, but there are two ways to negotiate. If it's order, it has to be by endorsement and delivery, and if it's a bearer negotiation, it has to be by delivery. So let's go look at those. Those are really confusing right there. Got some examples. Here's a negotiation. This is it sounds really complicated, but it's not. Somebody issued a payroll check to the page of the order of Lloyd Sorensen. He takes it to the bank. He signs his name on the back of the check. It's an endorsement, and gives it to the teller. That's a delivery. So now we have an endorsement and a delivery. He receives cash back from it. Sorensen has negotiated the check to the bank. Okay? Now, for that same instrument, okay, Sorensen takes the check to the bank, delivered it to the teller, did not sign it. The transfer would not qualify as a negotiation. In that situation, the transfer would be treated as an assignment. The bank becomes an assignee rather than the holder of it. He would probably just put this into his checking account. So that kind of, I mean, it sounds complicated, but it's all a matter of whether it's signed or not signed. Here's another one. Now this is a bearer instrument, and this is really interesting. Richard Cray writes a check, payable to cash, to Jessie. He's didn't put her name on it, just payable to cash. And that's now a bearer instrument because Jessie's name's not on it, so whoever has it and can present it to the bank becomes the holder of it. Arnold places the check in her wallet, which is stolen. The thief has possession of the check, and at this point, there's no rights. The thief has no rights to the check. But if the thief delivers the check to an innocent third person, negotiation has occurred, okay? All rights to the check are passed absolutely to the third person, and Arnold loses all rights to recover the proceeds from the check from that third-party person, from the innocent person. This is an example of a holder in due course, by the way. So, of course, Arnold can attempt to recover the amount from the thief if you can find the thief. So those are some examples of transfers and negotiations. So we need to have some questions here. So we will look at 3 questions, and then we'll come back and start over with endorsements. We'll start over with endorsements. And then that will end this part of the overview. So, welcome back. Let's look at some endorsements. There are 4 kinds. You've got a blank endorsement. And that's just a simple endorsement right here. This is called a special endorsement. When you write above it, pay to Anthony Barton, and then endorse underneath. This is a qualified. This one says without recourse. You can see this. This is all kinds of. And this is called a restrictive. And a restrictive is when you write for deposit only or for collection only on it. So 4 types of endorsements. And we will have one more question, and I do thank you for muddling through this with me. I'll try to find some better examples. Please have questions ready in class. Thank you.